Welcome to Behind the Fang, the Progeny Podcast. A podcast by, for, and about the members of the Progeny Vampire community in Second Life. This is the voice of Lachiel, the Source. Tonight I am speaking with Diabolic Oberon and Lady Parthenia, Blood Regent of Ravensclaw. Let's get started. How are you guys doing tonight?
Well, I'm all the better for your asking.
Yeah, doing great.
Yeah, well, hopefully this will be a little bit of fun for you guys. You guys are both kind of infamous, but I'm still going to ask the basic question. I would like you guys to introduce yourselves and your role within the Progeny universe. I guess Oberon can go first, seeing as he is a Diabolic.
Well, being now the oldest Diabolic outside of Lachiel, let's see. My role in the system is to, basically, as I see it, is to take care of making sure that marketing works efficiently. I also am the Sage of Ravensclaw, which a lot of people have their issues with, but just so that everybody is aware, I do not run the political faction of Progeny for Ravensclaw. That is Archledge's job and Blood Regent Parthenia's job, which is one of the reasons why most people do not perceive exactly how I seem to function within the system. But we hope to clarify that. Especially with this podcast.
Yeah, and actually this is one of the topics I want to talk to you guys about at the end of this segment, once we get past the personal stuff, because I think your relationship with the system and your relationship with Ravensclaw is not only controversial to some extent, it's actually quite interesting. So Lady Parthenia, why don't you introduce yourself and then we will continue on.
Okay, well, I am Lord Oberon's Infernal and Blood Regent of RC, as you said, and I'm the sovereign of the Lasombra clan, which is within the RC bloodline. And I'm also very interested in publicity and, creating a good name for Progeny within SL at large. And I'm very excited now to be the editor-in-chief of the Progeny magazine, which is going to start up really soon.
And you also have a pretty good role in, Avatar Choice? What's the other magazine?
Yes,
yeah.
Avi Choice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool article you did on Progeny not too long ago.
Yeah,
so,
I interviewed you, and so now you're turning the tables.
I always like to be interviewed, It's I just have a tiny little ego. So, anyway, Parthenia, tell us, how did you get involved, or how did you get introduced to Progeny?
Oh.
Do you remember? It was ages ago.
I remember very well. I went into a house, Jarl, my SL hubby, and I went into a house that we were very unhappy with, well, especially I was. And so we quickly separated from that house and created our own. And we joined the Lasombra clan, which is my clan now. It had Soraya was its queen at that time, and we were kind of controversial because we had turned our back on the arch of the FC line, which is now extinct. And we had affiliated ourselves with RC, but there was no way of resiring or anything. So we were sort of, betwixt and between, because we had the FC blood, but we were politically affiliated and considered ourselves to be fully a part of RC. So it was kind of a strange situation for a while there.
That situation itself is what led directly to the invention of the resire system. You were a very large influence on that coming to fruition. Oberon, ages ago, do you recall the circumstances of your introduction to the system?
Oh, I most certainly do, with great pleasure and relish. we had this wonderful vampire who was a part of Ravensclaw by the name of Fidesz. And Fidesz knew of my conundrum at the time, which was Ravensclaw had grown to such a point where another system we were just not happy with because we could not separate into various houses and still remain a growing family and clan as we were. So Fidesz was aware of exactly what I was seeking, and she came to me and said, I have this great new HUD that you need to try. And it took her 3 days to persuade me, and then she actually sired me. So Fidesz Torres is the individual who brought me into Progeny.
Yeah, that was back in the very, very early days. If I'm not mistaken, the buttons on the HUD were still white buttons with red text, and there was nothing fancy about it.
No, there was not a fancy thing about it at all, but it was a good time and a great concept, and I remember our first conversations and everything that you had planned and what you wanted to do, and I've seen quite a bit of it come to fruition. And that's been the joy of it. Watching the system grow has been a joy.
I agree. We've had our speed bumps, we've had our trials and tribulations, but all in all, we keep moving forward and we keep finding new and interesting ground to stand on.
We sure do.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your relationship with Progeny and your relationship with Ravensclaw. Now, something I've never come out and actually said to anybody, back when I first approached you about becoming a Diabolic, I knew of your affiliation with Ravensclaw. This is why I made you an arch vampire to begin with. And I knew in asking you to step up into the role of a Diabolic that you could not completely separate yourself from Ravensclaw, because Ravensclaw was your baby, much in the way that the Progeny system was my baby. So, I went into it knowing that you would still have ties. You would never be completely devoid of that feeling of that closeness with your home clan. And this is largely what led to the concept of a patron Diabolic. Now, what is your take on all this?
Well, when it comes to rendering assistance to the various vampires in the Progeny system, I do not even bother to look at what clan, what house, who they're affiliated with, who they're sired with. If assistance is needed, I will render it, especially on a technical side. When it comes to the political actions within Progeny, I have to weigh very carefully just what I'm doing. And a lot of that involves listening very closely to what various individuals have to say and then acting upon it, but without a political bent. There have been many individuals in Ravensclaw that I have tossed out on their butts, so to speak, because of things that they've done to various other factions within Progeny itself. And I do that without prejudice.
And Ravensclaw spans many different systems, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we currently are running 6 different HUDs, of which many people...
How can you see out of your screen?
Well, if you saw my desk, you'd know how. I have 4 monitors in front of me.
I have 3. Okay, you've got me trumped. So anyway, your role in Progeny, I have never seen you, mistreat anybody or deny service to anybody that was not related to Ravensclaw. I've never seen you give specific treatment, preferential treatment to Ravensclaw. You've always seemed fairly neutral to me. I know a lot of negative stuff has been attributed to you in some cases through rumor and the rumor mill, but I've never seen actual evidence of it. So, I mean, our ongoing relationship has been fantastic. You've been a huge supporter of me in the system, and just the effort you do to keep everybody informed and happy and gathering information so that we can continue to grow things. It's been wonderful.
It's been a joy.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask both of you. It's one of my traditional questions for my guest on here, my second episode. What would you say is your most memorable or favorite experience you've had in Progeny? Let's start with Oberon.
My most memorable, Lord, there are so many. Actually, let me back that up. I believe it was when we had decided to start hunting for a sim.
Mm-hmm.
And the excitement that was generated amongst my ex-compatriots and yourself, when we actually started by finding a mainland sim.
Yep, I remember.
Yeah, and it was quite wonderful to watch Tyrus work, and Super was learning. It was quite enjoyable at the time. And then we got the current sim that we're on was originally provided by Saint.
Yep.
So it was, I know where 99.9% of the bodies are buried.
Yeah. Well, as I recall,
I'd love to resurrect, but time will tell.
Well, you never know. There's no barrier to certain people returning. The situation around the formation of the original sim, I recall that there was a lot of interest. At the time, I had moved my lab around. It was hosted by different people periodically, and many people were complaining that by my lab being on one clan's land versus another clan's land gave some people unfair advantage. And I originally found the mainland sim and rented it, I rented it, and we got it, but the landscaping that Super and Tyrus wanted to do didn't quite work with mainland, and it didn't support enough avatars. So Saint offered up the sim he had, and that's a big part of the reason he received his Diabolic role is in the early days of Progeny, he donated a full sim and covered the cost of its tier for some time to give us a chance to get up to the point where we could afford it, with revenue from the system. Oddly enough, that revenue supporting the sim itself really just started happening recently. We did still cover it out of pocket quite a bit, but I have no regrets. I think having the sim and a common place for the members of Progeny to meet and socialize has been a wonderful thing.
It really has. And if I may interject, I absolutely love what Diabolico Lino and Tasha have done.
Oh, hands down.
The work they have done is absolutely spectacular. Mm-hmm. I am exceedingly appreciative of what they've done both on the website and what they've done with the sim.
Yeah, I've actually had a few comments about this in the previous podcast, but it was after we stopped recording. Those two, when we had the falling out with Diabolic Super and Diabolic Tyrus, and I finally kind of hit my breaking point and returned all their stuff, I shut down the sim with the expectation that maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and then we would have it open again. Lino and Tasha, 24 hours later, were ready to reopen it. It still took several weeks afterwards to really fine tune it, but they're
still tweaking.
But that much work they did in 24 hours it was amazing. Just watching those guys work was it was almost like there was an army of them. It's really, really cool. And the work they've done in the lab with the different kind of objects they're building, every time I have an inspiration or an idea for a new product or a new service, I mention it to them, and the next day there's 3 or 4 different versions of it waiting for me to approve or disapprove. I got a backlog of at least a year's worth of scripting to do to make all these objects work. Yeah. So, Parth, what do you think of the new sim?
Oh, I think it's beautiful. It's great space, and I like the fact that it's not a super tall building. It's actually got a lot of width to it in the castle itself, so there's spaces for all the different functions.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's spectacular.
Yeah, there's definitely things I liked about the old castle. It was a beautiful scenic piece, but the new castle is definitely very easy to navigate around and find things. I love the spaces. I love the council rooms. I think they're really well designed for our purpose. And as we grow, it's just been able to grow with us quite nicely. So, pretty much we really covered all the questions because we just kept talking. So I'm going to skip on into the next section. The first section of this podcast is called Mythology Synthesis. And in this section, I like to talk about different features of the system that have been introduced in the past, present, or future that have shaped the mythology that has sort of organically grown up around the system. And in the last episode, we talked about the upcoming Slayers and Lycanthropes. This time around, because you two have been rather central figures in a lot of conflict that has happened in the past, as well as central figures in the attempt to establish the first justice system, I want to talk about interclan conflict and the concept of clan sovereign territories and strongholds. Now, what do you guys think is the primary cause of conflict between our clans?
That's easy. There are many cultural differences between individuals and the way they live in real life, which flows into Second Life. Mm-hmm. When you look at the differences in culture and politics, we have folks who in real life live under completely different political systems than we in America do. And a lot of their actions reflect the influences of their real life politics and culture. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it actually, one of the things that I absolutely love about Progeny is the fact that we are a worldwide organization. Mm-hmm. We are a group that is educating people. I see young ones in their teens and 20s who are just in awe of the different political factions and the different political situations. I mean, it's like, for instance, Archvary and myself, we are diametrically opposed in our political thinking. But I respect him, because he's an individual who is quite willing to speak his mind and stand by his word, and that says volumes to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the wonderful thing. Parth, you and I have discussed this very subject on a number of occasions, so I'll let you butt in anytime you want.
Well, in terms of what causes conflict, I think, because the different clans and the different bloodlines all do have their own cultures, and when you have people who, don't perceive the vampire roleplay as all, being all about fighting one another, encountering those who just want to go out and bite or attack Sims or whatever, I mean, that's where you get a lot of conflict. And mm-hmm. You're not going to do very much damage to somebody's prims with, your little bite with your HUD, but I think what upsets people is the intentionality mm-hmm. behind it, because they are perceiving it as a political.
Yeah, they see it as a personal attack, and I think that there's a major conflict. This isn't everything, this isn't all of it, but there's two major groups within Progeny. There's the role players and the lifestylers. I've had this conversation many, many times with many different people, but never actually spoken to everybody at once like I am right now. So the lifestylers tend to always be in character. Their character is a part of them. It's not so much being in character, it's just being themselves. And they take everything very seriously and very personal because their character is an extension of themselves. Role players are more, I'm not going to say gamers, but, the role is more of a separate thing to them, and that they enjoy when they're doing it, but they do other things as well. And some of those role players will go in the excitement of capture and chase and kill, end up offending the lifestylers who may not have wanted a part of that. So the difference in style of role play gets, smashed together head on, and that causes a great deal of the suffering and conflict we have within the community. What do you guys think about that?
Well, yeah, I think it's very much a respect issue. I mean, you mentioned that we are sometimes at the center of conflict, but I think it's you're probably referring to the war.
Yes.
We've had a couple of those.
Yeah, there's been a few. Well, we are kind of... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, my motivation there was that somebody who has absolutely no interest in fighting and would never go and disrupt somebody else got attacked on a sim that I'm affiliated with, and it was, it's just kind of the lack of respect that's shown there. I mean, if people want to go around and fight and have fun with that, I think that's great. I think people should absolutely do that, but at the same time use common sense and respect the boundaries of others. And we don't always see that happening.
I agree 100% there, but it doesn't always work that way. Getting back to the main portion of this topic and the feature / addition I would like to add to the system, you guys were largely instrumental in the original concept of a justice system, and that was largely opposed because of the perception that it would encroach upon clan sovereignty, basically allowing the conclave to legislate, and then all the clans become sort of a subsidiary of the conclave. And to some extent, the way it was kind of put together, there might be a minor grain of truth to that, but I don't think that was the intention. But I do believe that, clan sovereignty is key. We must protect that, but the clans do not act in a vacuum. Everybody is sharing territory in Second Life. And this concept came to me, it's been about a year ago, where I was thinking about all the different conflicts we have and the fact that this clan's laws do not match that clan's laws. And I came to realize that one of the major obstacles we have is that there is no territory. In real life, you have countries where this country's law is different than that country's law, and when you're in this country, you have to obey their laws. If not, you go to jail. In Second Life, we have no space, no country aside from the sim. And while there are some conflicts on one clan sim or the other clan sim, 90% of it tends to be out in the public. So something I thought of a while ago is the introduction of clan territories or feeding grounds and clan strongholds, which would be like a fortress. And the concept would be that each clan that has or owns or rents a sim could declare a stronghold. And that would not only be marked as their territory, but also give them home field defensive advantage against any sort of attacks, be it by slayers, lycanthropes, or other vampires. And then territory could be claimed by, organized feeding and or, hanging out in a specific sim. And then that sim could be sort of, King of the Hill flagged as being belonging to this house or this clan. Those areas could be contested, but as long as one clan's flag is flying, that clan's laws apply. So if another vampire from a different clan comes into Shady Brooks and starts killing mortals, and that's against the clan's laws that apply there, that particular vampire can be held accountable for it, and or the clan from which they came could suffer repercussions because of the illegal actions of their citizens. What do you guys think about this idea?
Oh, I think the idea is wonderful, but let me interject for a moment. Back when I was the Arch of Ravensclaw, when we were first establishing the outcast vampires. The outcasts had absolutely no place to go. Mm-hmm. And Ravensclaw had 4 Sims. So we established that all outcast vampires could come and call any part of the Ravensclaw territory their home territory on one condition. And that condition was that they had to subscribe to the Ravensclaw Charter while they were on our Sims.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that worked out very well, and even to this day, we have many outcasts that still come by the Ravensclaw Sims in order to be able to feel what they think of as a safe zone.
Exactly, and that works out really well, but it's still limited to just Ravensclaw.
Correct.
Yeah, and
correct.
It doesn't necessarily apply.
What we're talking about is more of a Second Life sim grid-wide system, which I think is absolutely magnificent. The question is, how can that be implemented and still serve everybody?
Well, the concept would be that, activity is already logged. Bytes are logged. Different kinds of activity is logged. All we have to do is compare that to a table that shows which clans, have territory, and introduce into the HUD something that lets you know you are now entering the territory of SD or RC or whatever, so that the participant coming in knows that they better follow the laws of that clan. Now, of course, you're still going to run into problems where maybe they don't know what the laws are of that clan, but in real life, ignorance of the law is no defense. So
Correct.
You be on your best behavior if you're not in the wilderness and you're on some other clan's land. I personally think that this allows us to role play crime and punishment rather than just request bans for people, because we can identify this vampire did in fact break the laws of this clan, which has jurisdiction over this sim where the thing happened. So right now it's just this clan versus that clan, and no way to say whose laws apply.
But then for some people, wouldn't it limit their mobility to places that are associated with their clan or their bloodline? I mean, I'm thinking about people who go out and work in clubs, they're DJs, they're hosts, and so forth.
Yeah, they might be outside of their territory when they go to those places. The wilderness is anywhere that is not claimed by any given clan or house. Now, let's say and I'm just brainstorming here because I haven't actually developed this subsystem yet. It's just still on paper and theory. So let's say that, Vampire George is a DJ at a club, and that club is in the wilderness. But he goes there every night, and by being there every night, that territory, that area around him would slowly be claimed by his house. And if enough of his house members and clan members continue to go there and periodically feed there, it would eventually also be claimed by the clan. And then it becomes a sort of not so much a safe zone as he has a significant advantage when he's there, and the laws of his clan and house apply to anyone else that come there once that land has been effectively claimed.
That's a good concept.
You know what I mean? Anyway, we can work on that. And we are kind of coming up on 30 minutes fast, so I did want to talk about a related idea. This is related to the Slayers concept, and this is something that Super and I brainstormed ages ago that I really wanted to implement, but everything blew up and never got around to finishing it, but I'm thinking about bringing it back. And this is the concept of Templar Crusaders. This was going to be a top secret thing that he and I were going to implement and unleash on the vampire community, just to see the reaction and generate some mystery. But I think it might be better to forewarn is forearmed. And here's the concept. One of the reasons Slayers is now on the hot seat and being developed is the rash we've been having of masquerade violations, people going out and outing other vampires to non-vampires in order to try to get those offending vampires banned from this sim or that. And I mentioned this in the last podcast. This not only hurts the vampire in question, but it hurts the entire system. Now, the concept here is it's like an NPC slayer, only very powerful but very limited. And when a major masquerade violation occurs, let's say I get a hostile IM from a sim owner, what would happen is, or any diabolic gets such a, information that a masquerade violation has occurred, we could trigger a Templar being released. And the Templar would then go to that sim, investigate any blood spillage that is fresh, and it would latch on to a clan that has fed there, and then start randomly killing vampires of that clan for several nights. Vampires who have committed certain kinds of masquerade violations would have masquerade violation score of, like, say 1 to 4 that would be highlighted on their HUD. If you have more than 0 masquerade violations, you become a primary target while the Templar is targeting your clan. Also, as the Templar is running rampant, periodically he may randomly pick up a different lead and go after a different house or a different clan. So what do you guys think about this concept?
That's not bad. You can work the prestige into this too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of it not being something secretly unleashed, because that has caused a lot of problems in the past and a lot of resentment. So, I think, and it's a surprise enough if it happened to you, but I mean, I think you should kind of vaguely know that it's out there, and the Slayer concept is there.
Yeah, I think the two together, the Crusaders and the Slayers, would add just enough excitement and fear and just enough danger to curb some of these negative behaviors, such as spouting off to sim owners and going into somebody's workplace and disrupting the peace. Becoming obviously vampire activity in a non-vampire setting and drawing attention to the vampire community. Now, it won't make it go away, but I think it would definitely put a damper on some of these things.
So does this mean that the number of Slayers will be relatively small, or the number of Templars?
The number of Templars would be an automatic system. It's not really going to affect the Slayers. But the Slayer development is built around the idea that there will probably be 3 to 6 original Slayers for the beta test period. And after we have completed a shakedown and added any major features that need to be added in the first draft, then they will start to be able to, let's just say, embrace, although they'll have a different process than that. They'll be able to bring in new Slayers, and there will not be a limit on it, but there may be requirements that they have to meet to join the Slayers, because I really want role players in there and people who really want to contribute to the story rather than people that just want to go out and kill vampires. You know what I mean? Or cause trouble or drama. You know what I mean? If they want to get out there and kill vampires because they have a passion about, this vampire killed my mother and it's a great backstory, that's great. But not just to go out there and just cause trouble.
We've had enough of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Next section, fireside chat. In this section, I like to give everybody a chance to talk about their favorite vampire fiction. In the last episode, I mentioned The Awakening, the story of Benjamin Latham, as being one of my favorite vampire novels. Oberon, do you have a favorite vampire novel or movie or TV show?
My favorite vampire novels is Anne Rice. Mm-hmm. Having known Anne and having many conversations with her and reading all of her books, I mean, my most favorite character has always been Lestat.
I agree with that.
She just was absolutely marvelous. Her way of writing, her between her and her son Christopher, they're the ones that were responsible for piquing my interest in vampirism.
I actually had a conversation about this just this morning. This is also one of my favorite books. Now, I didn't care as much for Interview with a Vampire as I did for The Vampire Lestat and The Queen of the Damned. Primarily because as I was reading Interview with a Vampire, I kept thinking to myself, Lewis is an idiot. It's like, what is he thinking? Get his head out of his ass. But, when Lestat came along, it's like, it was just an awesome ride from the start to the finish of that book. And then Queen of the Damned, while I don't have a lot of specific memories of that book, I just thought it was so well written and the story was so awesome. And I've been inspired by that book in a lot of ways with the development of Progeny. No, I don't think I've borrowed anything specific aside from, the way the arch powers filter down from the top generation to lower was sort of based on how Akaja was able to feed her blood to Lestat and raise him in generations and give him more power and things like that. Really, really one of my favorite books, too. Did I ever tell you that I went to two of Anne Rice's parties?
No, you did not.
No, I went to the Anne Rice Vampire Fan Club Halloween parties in New Orleans. I went to the one that was just before the release of Interview with a Vampire, the movie, when she was all up in arms against Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise taking the parts that they did before she saw it and said, "Oh my God, they're good." That was an awesome party. But then the really big one was the Memnock Ball. That I barely remember most of that night, but the costumes and her was it St. Elizabeth's? Is that the name of the compound that she bought there? Just stunning place. It was one of the most amazing nights that I had in my 20s.
It must have been marvelous, yes, because I lived in New Orleans for 3.5 years.
It's an awesome city. I really enjoyed the two times I got to visit. Just I can remember sitting in this little bar called Igor's. It's right across the street from the Pontchartrain on St. Charles, and I remember sitting in there with my cousin who lived there, having beer. We were drunk beyond recognition, sitting there playing the video poker games and eating the Igor burgers, which were awesome. And I was probably 2:00 in the morning, and I walked out onto the veranda, and there's just this light drizzle coming down, and the air was warm and steamy, and the little trolley went rattling up the street, and the sense of ambiance was almost tangible. It was just really, really cool place. I haven't been back since Katrina. I hope some of the magic is still there.
Well, from word that I hear from friends down there, there's still a lot of magic.
Okay, Parth, what is your favorite vampire story?
Well, my favorite author is Anne Rice also, so I'm afraid I can't really top what Oberon has said there. I didn't know that you had met Anne Rice, so that's amazing and fascinating to hear. But I think in general, what I like, or what kind of draws me in to vampire stories, is just that sense of what it would be like to live for such a long period of time and to see all of these different things unfold in the world, because there's a tragedy to that, as you know, like everything you knew would sort of crumble periodically, and you would have to adapt constantly to new circumstances.
And that's one of
so I think that
I'll say that's one of the elements of her stories, is that, the vampires in her stories do not adapt to change well. They can't embrace the new. They just see everything they know going away.
That's why the concept of going to ground is something that we could possibly consider utilizing within Progeny.
Well, that's basically what hibernation is in Progeny. But yeah, it's more or less the same thing. So, the next section, briefly, is Crystal Ball. Is there anything that you guys would like to see added to or omitted from Progeny to make it a better system or community? Is there anything you're looking forward to in the future that you predict will happen?
Ooh, that's a good one. What I'd like to see and what I can possibly predict is an awareness system for all of the vampires. Something that will... It's part of the concept of what you were talking about earlier, but making vampires aware that there are vampires in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It's how to implement that. I mean, right now I know a lot of people would love it when they walk on a sim to know that, oh, there are 6 progeny vampires here.
Right. That's actually something... I'm sorry, I keep interrupting, but that's actually something that's in the plan. It was originally in the first Progeny HUD, but I couldn't make it work without crashing the HUD, because when you scan for that many UUIDs, it can bring the thing to its knees. But I've got some ideas for a way to streamline that and make it a little bit more feasible, and I'm hoping that's going to work in the next framework, which is a lot more compact and a lot more compartmentalized. So I may be able to do a sim-wide scan and parsing of UUIDs to determine which ones are vampires and which ones aren't. Now I could do a sim-wide ping and just have the HUDs respond to the challenge, but that doesn't identify vampires if their HUDs aren't on.
Correct.
Right. So that's kind of what held that up. But it will get in there. We will get that. I just don't know when. Parth?
Well, one of the things that I always hoped would happen has actually happened, in the sense that there are now these units within Progeny that vampires can become a part of, like the Inquisitors and the Advocates and the Magazine and the Scribes and so forth, so that people can really feel like they have a role within the system, which was lacking before because all we had were clan positions.
Right.
So I think it's nice that these centralized, and I think it creates more of a sense of connection among all the different units within the game. So I've been very excited to see that happen, and that is one of the things that we had hoped for when we were talking about the original judicial system. We had assumed that the judges would not be arches, but would be very, players who would show themselves to be very responsible and conscientious from a number of different bloodlines across the system. So, but this is a different avenue for doing that.
Right. And this is just a natural response to the growth of the community. I simply can't handle all the support requests by myself anymore, nor can the Diabolics. By allowing the vampires to govern the vampires and police the vampires, we've established a better way of handling these support situations, while at the same time giving those who want to participate a new way. I'm also very looking forward to the new SLARP system, which is the storytellers group that we've been working on. That's going to add a whole new dimension to the community.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
amazing watching that development.
Yeah, but that's a far bigger topic than we can cover in the remaining couple of minutes we have.
Yeah. One of the things that people have really shown a lot of interest in is the familiar role, because there's a lot of people who have individuals that they want to bring in as familiars, and I'm wondering, because I just heard you talking about the radar, I'm wondering if there could maybe be a simple HUD that just gave them limited radar, even if we... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just to kind of make it a little quicker here because we're running out of time. I often mention the lycanthropes and the slayers coming, but familiars are also coming at the same time. The 3 HUDs are largely based on the same thing and will be implemented together. So the familiars will come out at the same time that the lycanthropes and the slayers do. And their initial HUD, I'm not sure if they're going to have a long-range radar, but they will be aware of vampires, and they will be able to see when vampires are feeding around them and stuff. So that will be in their HUD. Okay,
that's great.
So let's wrap this thing up. And section 5 is whispers in the dark, and I want to respond to some listener mail. And I had a post from Chopper Deathly, who had a question. What would be implemented to kill or have to offset the slayers in the works, or is this not feasible? If I understand her question correctly, she's wondering how can vampires defend against slayers when they attack. And the answer is I'm not quite sure, but one thing I am sure about is vampires will only be truly vulnerable to slayer attacks when they're feeding. Otherwise, a vampire will basically be able to rip a slayer apart if they can get a hold of them. I imagine that vampires their claws or their talons will be introduced at the same time as the slayers, because bites are inefficient for combat. We need a better way of dealing damage. Slayers will have weapons. Vampires need their own weapons. That will happen. Vampires aren't going to be completely at the mercy of slayers. But if you're caught feeding in a public place, you run an extreme risk of having a stake. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned before about how vampires would be most vulnerable when they were feeding. How would that be determined, though? Like, would you be using bite records to see where there was a density of bites happening and then send slayers there?
No, I'm not going to send slayers there when bites are happening.
They would get a notification that this is happening.
Maybe if they have certain powers, more like they might get notice that there's a lot of feeding activity going on this particular territory, this sim, and then they might go there and stake it out. But they really need to be there observing, and their HUD might let them know when a feeding is happening near them. And then they can identify which one is the vampire. I haven't worked out all the mechanics of that, but they're not going to get like a bell or an alarm going off at the clubhouse and they all slide down the pole and hop in the Slayer truck and run off to the vampire fire. There's going to be more to it than that. They're going to have to do detective work. They're going to have to find out where the vampires are feeding and then stake it out. And then, like I said, they can't go toe to toe with the vampires. They're going to have to be sneaky. Another way they might be able to do is trace a vampire that feeds in public a lot back to their lair and find them in their coffin and stake them. But that requires resting places, and I haven't finished that subsystem either. But I imagine that will come out pretty soon after slayers are introduced.
Good concept.
Yeah. Resting place is a good concept for mythology synthesis in an upcoming episode. I'll put that on my list. All right, guys, we're kind of at about 47 minutes, and I don't want to push this close to an hour because it's too big to upload at that point. So I want to thank you both for taking the time out of your day, Diabolic Oberon and Blood Regent Parthenia. I know you guys are very busy, and it means a lot to me that you made time to appear on the show and give everybody some of your thoughts.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, very happy to do it.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. Feel free to comment in the comment section below the post. I will be putting good comments into upcoming shows. And everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Safe paths to everyone.